Hi everyone, welcome back to Radio Night Crime. Before you drift off, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's relax and jump into tonight's case. Story 1. Located along the Arabian Sea, Karachi is a vibrant metropolis and the economic heartbeat of Pakistan. Known as the City of Lights, Karachi is a melting pot of cultures, offering a rich blend of history, modernity, and diverse traditions. However, in 2010, a horrific incident shook the country. Two women who were childhood friends, sharing life's hardships and joys, suddenly find themselves at the center of a horrific crime. One friend betrays the other's deep trust, causing actions that exceed human limits. Aisha Khan and Nadia Malik grew up in the heart of Karachi's impoverished slums, where every day was a battle for survival. For them, friendship was not only a comfort, but also a source of strength to overcome harsh challenges. Aisha, with her strong personality and iron will, always takes the lead. Nadia, gentler and calmer, finds encouragement in her friend's defiant optimism. They are two perfect pieces, always standing side by side to face the precarious life. The two do odd jobs to make a living. Aisha often worked in a small garment factory, where she spent her days hunched over an old sewing machine. Nadia, on the other hand, took jobs cleaning houses for wealthy families. Although the work was hard and the pay was meager, both tried to hold on to the belief that one day life would be better. Things began to change when Aisha met Samir Khan, a truck driver who regularly delivered goods to the garment factory where she worked. Samir not only caught Aisha's attention with his simple looks, but also with his sincere attitude and the respect he showed her. In a world where women like Aisha were often looked down upon, Samir's attention was a breath of fresh air. He has nothing but an old truck and a kind heart, but that is enough to awaken in Aisha a desire for a different future. The brief conversations between Aisha and Samir gradually turn into longer meetings. Samir would often drop by to bring Aisha small gifts like a bag of ripe mangoes or clothes for her. Aisha felt appreciated in a way she had never known before. This made her start dreaming of a life where she didn't have to be strong all the time, but could rely on someone. However, the feelings that blossomed between Aisha and Samir were not something Nadia could easily accept. Although Nadia did not say it, she began to feel a slight distance between herself and Aisha. Their long night conversations became less and less, and instead Aisha spent time talking about Samir. Nadia smiled, hiding her sadness, because more than anyone she wanted Aisha to be happy. About a month after Aisha started her relationship with Samir, Nadia, her best friend, also entered a new turn in her life. Nadia's family arranged a marriage for her with Faisal Ahmed, a man who lived in the same village. Faisal was neither rich nor romantic like the fairy tales that Nadia sometimes fantasized about, but he was a strong and determined man. He worked as a stoker in a traditional industry, a hard and harsh job that required stamina and a strong will. From the first day she met Faisal, Nadia felt the sincerity in his eyes. He did not try to show off his wealth or hide the difficulties in his life. Faisal, a man with calloused hands from hard work, did not promise an easy life, but he pledged to do everything to protect and care for Nadia. This made her, who was used to deprivation and uncertainty, feel secure. The wedding was simple but cozy, with only family and a few close friends attending. Aisha, as Nadia's best friend, helped Nadia prepare everything from choosing her dress to decorating the wedding. However, Aisha had a strange feeling inside. She was happy for Nadia, but couldn't help but worry whether married life would bring her friend true happiness. Nadia's life after marriage began with familiar difficulties. Faisal often worked in high temperatures, working between furnaces to earn enough money to support his family. But he never complained. Every evening when he returned home, he always tried to bring Nadia a moment of peace, whether it was just sitting together drinking tea or chatting about the day's work. Nadia, with her gentle and caring personality, always tried to ease her husband's fatigue. She cleaned the house, prepared simple but warm meals, and sometimes helped Faisal fix the broken tools he brought back from the workshop. The friendship between Aisha and Nadia remained, at least in form, as it had in the early days. They still saw each other regularly, still shared daily stories, but beneath that intimacy were undercurrents that only one of them could clearly feel. In the early years of her marriage to Samir, she was full of hopes for a happy family life. But as the years passed, those hopes turned into pressures as she was unable to conceive. Aisha's in-laws, who had high hopes for her, began to ask questions, first in gentle terms, then in pointed criticism. "Children are a blessing, but why don't you have any yet?" her mother-in-law would say with a faint smile, but her eyes held clear disappointment. Samir, though still loving and supportive of his wife, his silence in the face of criticism from his family also makes Aisha feel lonely. Meanwhile, Nadia seemed to be living the perfect life that Aisha could only dream of. As time passed, jealousy. In Aisha's heart, jealousy was no longer just a fleeting feeling. It gradually became a simmering anger, a deep dissatisfaction not only with herself but also with life and especially with Nadia. In Aisha's eyes, Nadia, whom she once considered a close sister, seemed to have it all so easy. A loving husband, 3 healthy children, and a happy family. While she, despite her best efforts, received only criticism and disappointment, Nadia, still innocent and carefree as ever, did not notice the change in Aisha's heart. She often visited her friend, bringing home cooked food or small gifts to cheer up Aisha and Samir. During the conversations, Nadia told funny stories about her children, Faisal's work challenges, and never forgot to encourage Aisha, in a warm tone, "You are stronger than anyone I know. Everything will be okay." But for Aisha, those words were no longer comforting. They were like invisible knives cutting into her self-esteem, making her jealousy more intense. After each time Nadia left, she felt empty. Dark thoughts began to creep in. Did Nadia really care about her? Or was she just showing off her happiness? Nadia's sincere smiles and gestures now seemed fake and ostentatious in Aisha's eyes. Samir noticed the change in his wife's attitude and tried to help her overcome it. He took Aisha to see a doctor and sought fertility treatments, hoping to restore her confidence. But for Aisha, these efforts were not enough to ease her inner pain. Nadia's image of her perfect family haunts her like a ghost, haunting and suffocating her soul. Then one day, when Nadia visits with her bright smile and familiar fruit basket, all the emotions that have been suppressed in Aisha's heart suddenly burst forth. She could no longer keep her composure and said coldly, "Aren't you tired, Nadia? You always talk about your perfect family. I know you're happy. There's no need to remind yourself of it every time we meet." Nadia was stunned by Aisha's bitter words. Trying to stay calm, she explained, "I just wanted to share my joy. I didn't mean to hurt you." But Aisha didn't want to listen. The pent-up emotions turned into a torrent of criticism and blame, pouring out uncontrollably. Nadia, though trying to maintain her composure, could not hide the pain in her eyes. She quietly left, leaving Aisha alone in the empty room. The air was heavy. The fear of not being able to have children haunted Aisha, seeping into her every thought, every sleep. She felt cornered by her mother-in-law's questioning gaze, Samir's silence, and Nadia's seemingly innocent stories about her perfect family. Aisha began to tell herself that she was fighting not only for her happiness, but also for her survival in her husband's family. This thought, which started out as a vague idea, gradually turned into an obsessive plan. In her troubled mind, Aisha began to believe that if she had Nadia's baby, everything would be resolved. She would no longer have to endure humiliation, no longer be compared to Nadia. She would regain her place in her husband's family and prove that she was worthy of love. These sick thoughts became more and more evident. Aisha began to closely monitor Nadia's schedule, learning her friend's daily routine. She knew that Nadia usually took her youngest child to school in the morning and was home alone the rest of the day. Aisha tried not to let Nadia know that their friendship was being distorted by jealousy and obsession. Aisha even went online, looking for ways to carry out her plan without leaving a trace. She spent hours reading about drugs, methods that could render Nadia impotent. But even in those moments, a small part of Aisha still felt scared. She knew what she was thinking was wrong, that it was beyond the bounds of any relationship. But the obsession was so ingrained that she could no longer distinguish right from wrong. Aisha began gathering the necessary supplies. She prepared a strong sleeping potion, a pair of gloves to hide fingerprints, and a large scarf that she planned to use to carry out her plan. Every step she took was carefully calculated, but inside, a storm of emotions was raging. Hatred, pain, and despair mixed together, causing Aisha to no longer see Nadia as the close friend she once loved, but as a means to achieve what she desired. On May 15, 2010, Aisha Khan entered a dark chapter in her life. After months of planning, she realized that the time had come. Her husband, Samir, is away for days on business, leaving the house empty and quiet, the perfect setting to commit an unthinkable act. Aisha invited Nadia to her home with a sweet invitation, leaving Nadia unsuspecting. When Nadia stepped through the door, carrying fruit and a sincere smile, Aisha quickly took action. She used a large wooden stick to hit Nadia hard on the head from behind. Nadia collapsed to the floor, unconscious, while Aisha, with cold eyes and iron determination, dragged her best friend's motionless body into a closed room. In the dark room, Aisha bound Nadia's hands and feet with duct tape, each movement performed with care. The sharp knife she had prepared days before glinted in the dim light. Aisha, no longer the close friend who had shared all her joys and sorrows with Nadia, took the action she believed would change her fate. As the blade sliced through Nadia's abdomen, blood spurted out, staining the floor and Aisha's hands red. Nadia woke up in excruciating pain, but was unable to fight back. Her life slowly left her body as she lost too much blood. After a few minutes, Nadia died on the spot, her eyes wide open in despair. Meanwhile, Aisha continued her gruesome work, trying to remove the unborn baby from Nadia's womb. However, due to her lack of medical skills and knowledge, the baby could not survive. After realizing that her plan had failed, Aisha fell into a state of panic, but she quickly regained her composure. With her mind distorted by obsession and despair, she hastily cleaned up the scene, wrapped Nadia's body and the fetus in a large cloth, and hid them in a hidden corner of the house. 3 days later, when Nadia's husband Faisal still hadn't returned home due to work at the factory, Aisha realized that she needed to take further action to cover up any traces. In her mind, Nadia's children were now a danger. They were living witnesses, the bond that could lead her to expose the crime. Aisha, in a fit of psychosis, decided that these 3 children must also be eliminated. Aisha lures 3 children, Alieshi 7, Hassan Aisher 2, into the bathroom with sweet lies. She pretends to play hide and seek, making them believe it is a harmless game. Once the bathroom door closes, Aisha puts her terrifying plan into action. Ali, the oldest boy, was the first. She held him down in the tub, letting him struggle and scream in terror. His screams grew fainter as Ali's tiny body lost its life. After Ali died, Aisha turned to Hassan. The boy, realizing something was wrong, screamed and tried to run away, but was held tight by Aisha. Hassan shared the same fate as his brother, his eyes wide with final terror. Sanaa, the youngest child, had no idea what was happening. She just looked at Aisha with innocent eyes. But that did not stop Aisha from doing anything. Sanaa was drowned in a matter of minutes, without a single cry. After killing the 3 children, Aisha spent the day trying to find a way to hide the bodies. She used the refrigerator and washing machine in Nadia's house to hide the bodies. Ali and Hassan's bodies were wrapped in old blankets and stuffed into the refrigerator, while Sanaa's tiny body was stuffed into the washing machine drum. Aisha cleans the crime scene, trying to erase any trace that could link her to the case. Aisha, her mind completely in disarray, convinces herself that she did what was necessary to protect herself. She locked Nadia's door and returned to her own home, trying to carry on as if nothing had happened. But even though she covered up her crime, Aisha could not hide the turmoil that gnawed at her soul. She began to hear the cries of children in her head, imaginary knocks on the door, and felt as if Nadia's eyes were watching her from every dark corner. But Aisha's crime could not be covered up forever. 3 days after the horrific murder in Nadia's house, Faisal returned home after a long business trip. As he got out of the taxi, he sensed something was wrong. The front door that Nadia always opened for him was now closed, locked from the inside. The lights in the house were off, and Nadia and the children were unreachable on their phones. Faisal had a hunch that something bad had happened. He knocked on the door, calling out the names of his wife and children, but only heard an eerie silence from inside. Faisal had no choice but to call the police. When the police arrived and broke down the door, a stench filled the air, forcing everyone to take a few steps back. In the darkness of the house, the air was thick with the smell of death. The lights were turned on. The police spread out to check every corner, and immediately they realized the tragedy had happened. In the living room, on the sofa, Nadia's body was found. Her eyes were wide open, her expression frozen in the final panic of her life. Bruises on her neck and signs of struggle around the area suggested she had been strangled. There were dried bloodstains on the floor, which led investigators to the two children's bedrooms. In the first bedroom, Nadia's older son was hidden in a closet. His small hands and feet were tied, and there were traces of a rope around his neck. The youngest girl was found under the bed, her small body wrapped in an old blanket. The final scene that made the investigation team shudder was the body of a newborn baby hidden in the bathroom, lying in a cardboard box. Nadia's home, once a happy home, is now the scene of a horrific murder. But what puzzles the police most is the killer's motive. How could someone so cruelly attack not only a woman but also 3 innocent children? Meanwhile, at a small funeral home not far away, Aisha, Nadia's best friend, is holding a funeral for the newborn baby she claims is hers. The event, though kept private, still strikes those who know her as odd. Everyone wondered, why did Aisha, who had shown no signs of pregnancy for months, suddenly announce that she had a child and that the child had died? Aisha's husband, Samir Khan, was the first to sense something was wrong. When he returned from a business trip, he was told about his wife's lost child. But this did not convince Samir at all. He asserted that during the time they were together, Aisha never showed any signs of pregnancy. Moreover, the time he was away on business could not have been long enough for his wife to give birth. Samir openly expressed his suspicions to the police, which led them to immediately expand their investigation into Aisha. One of the things that caught the police's attention was her inconsistent testimony at the funeral. While claiming that the baby had died shortly after birth, Aisha could not produce a birth certificate or any medical evidence to prove that she had ever been pregnant. The investigation progressed rapidly as police focused on the connection between Nadia's death and the sudden appearance of Aisha's child. When they examined communication records between the two, they discovered that Aisha had met Nadia several times in the weeks leading up to the murder. A key witness, a neighbor of Nadia's, testified that she saw Aisha leaving Nadia's house on the evening of the incident, furtively carrying a large bag. An autopsy of the newborn found in Nadia's home, further solidifies the suspicions. The child's DNA matches Nadia's, not Aisha's. The horrifying truth begins to emerge. The child Aisha claims is hers is actually Nadia's, and the deaths of Nadia and her children were intended to cover up a baby swap. With the evidence incontrovertible, the police decided to take action. They raided Aisha's home, where she was trying to maintain her perfect cover. When the police arrived, Aisha was in the kitchen, calm as if nothing had happened. But her calmness quickly disappeared when the arrest warrant was read. She had no chance to, and in the moment she was handcuffed, Aisha's expression changed completely, from shock to fear and finally to resignation. In the interrogation room, Aisha initially denied all the accusations, but as more evidence was presented, from her fingerprints at the scene to the baby's DNA, her lies became more and more untenable. After hours of psychological pressure, Aisha finally confessed to everything. She confessed that she had planned to kill Nadia after discovering that her best friend was pregnant. Aisha was consumed with jealousy. She longed for a child, and Nadia's happiness made her feel even more unfair. The sick thought that the child in Nadia's womb should be hers dominated her mind. On the fateful evening, Aisha went to Nadia's house, claiming to want to talk. While they were sitting in the living room, Aisha suddenly attacked Nadia, strangling her to death. She then proceeded to kill Nadia's children one by one to cover up the evidence. The brutality was carried out with terrifying coldness. Aisha was detained, awaiting trial. In prison, she showed no remorse, but remained silent, lost in her own thoughts. Perhaps in her twisted mind, she still believed that such actions were the only way to achieve what she desired. Aisha's trial in early 2011 quickly became the focus of public opinion. The courtroom was packed with people, from reporters, victims' families, to curious onlookers. The prosecutor opened the trial with a full reenactment of the crime. The irrefutable evidence was presented in clear detail, from witness testimony, Aisha's fingerprints at the scene, to the autopsy results proving the newborn was Nadia's biological child. The murder tools, including the rope used to strangle her and the bag containing the newborn baby, were displayed in court, adding to the heavy atmosphere. Throughout the trial, Aisha maintained a cold, sometimes defiant demeanor when confronted by Nadia's family. Her lack of remorse sparked public outrage. Faisal, Nadia's husband, could not hold back his tears many times when recounting memories of his family and the pain that nothing can erase. Ultimately, the jury sentenced Aisha to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She tried to appeal, citing insanity, but psychologists concluded that she was sane when she committed the crime. The verdict was upheld, bringing a haunting case to a close. Although justice has been served, the pain of Nadia's family and the trauma in the community will last forever. Story 2. In 2009, in a quiet residential area of Los Angeles, USA, a horrific case shook the entire city. The Simmons family, including Jacob Simmons, 45 years old, a therapist, his wife Emily Simmons, 42 years old, and their two daughters, Sophie, 15 years old, and Mia, 10 years old, became victims of a horrific massacre. The heartbreaking thing is that the perpetrator was Jacob, who was known as a loving father and husband, but under financial and psychological pressure, killed his entire family before killing himself. Jacob Simmons, born in Chicago, showed a passion for the medical field from an early age. Raised in a middle-class family where both parents worked in education, Jacob grew up with a deep sense of the value of service and compassion. His hard work and thirst for knowledge led him to become one of Chicago's leading therapists. Jacob's career began with years of dedicated study at Northwestern University, where he graduated with honors in psychotherapy. He then continued his professional development at a prestigious hospital, where he not only learned from the best teachers, but also began to develop his own dedicated and refined style of work. Jacob always believed that a doctor should not only heal the body, but also understand and help patients deal with their emotional wounds. With his calm personality, understanding, and excellent skills, Jacob quickly became recognized by the Chicago medical community. His patients, from those suffering from psychological problems due to daily stress to war veterans with deep pain, all respect Jacob. He not only treats them, but also gives them hope and encouragement to move on. Despite his busy life, he still needs time to relax. In 1994, while traveling to New York to attend a medical conference, Jacob Simmons meets Emily, an elementary school teacher with a bright smile and passionate eyes. The meeting takes place at a small coffee shop in Brooklyn, where they happen to sit at the same table because the place is full. Jacob, with his friendly nature, starts a conversation. He is fascinated by the way Emily talks about teaching with passion and pride. Emily, on the other hand, is impressed by Jacob's calmness and attentive listening attitude. The casual conversation lasts longer than expected, turning into an enjoyable afternoon. Before leaving the shop, the two exchange phone numbers, along with a promise to keep in touch. From then on, they keep in touch regularly through phone calls and handwritten letters. Jacob and Emily discovered that they had a lot in common, from their love of work, their concern for the community, to their passion for exploring new things. After just a few months of getting to know each other, they built a solid relationship based on empathy and mutual respect. A year later, on a trip to Cape Cod, Jacob decided to propose to Emily. He planned everything meticulously, from a romantic dinner on the sand to a ring carefully hidden in a seashell box. When he got down on one knee, Emily was completely surprised. but did not hesitate. She smiled brightly and accepted, turning that moment into a sweet memory, opening a new chapter in both of their lives. The wedding took place in March 1995. The wedding took place in a small garden on the banks of the Hudson River, where the two had chosen to mark the beginning of a new life. The weather was beautiful that day, with a clear blue sky and warm rays of sunlight gently adorning the scene. Emily walked down the aisle in a pure white dress, decorated with elegant lace details. Her hair was adorned with a simple wreath, making her look like a muse in a fairy tale. Jacob, in a black tuxedo, stood waiting at the end of the aisle, his eyes unable to take his eyes off his bride. When Emily walked up with her father on his arm, Jacob smiled gently, full of happiness. The ceremony was led by a close family friend, with sincere blessings for the couple. On stage, Jacob and Emily exchanged their wedding vows in front of family and friends. Jacob, with emotion in his voice, promised that he would always be there for Emily, loving and protecting her no matter what. Emily, tears in her eyes, responded by promising to love Jacob forever, no matter what difficulties lay ahead. When they exchanged rings, all eyes were on them, unable to hide their emotions. Finally, Jacob and Emily shared a passionate kiss, marking the moment they officially became husband and wife. Under the stage, the applause was endless, mixed with cheers and blessings from the guests. The wedding party took place right after the ceremony, with the participation of more than 100 guests, including friends, colleagues, and relatives from both sides. The wedding menu was carefully prepared, including dishes that both Jacob and Emily loved, showing their respect for the guests. Soft music played throughout the party, creating a warm and intimate atmosphere. The harmony and obvious love between Jacob and Emily moved many guests, even to tears. The sincere congratulations and bright smiles of the couple made the party an unforgettable memory for everyone. When the party ended, there was a loud applause and blessings. The wedding ended in complete happiness, opening a new chapter in their lives. After getting married, Jacob and Emily decided to move to Los Angeles, where they hoped to start a new and promising chapter in their lives. They were both excited about the plans that lay ahead. The city, with its dynamic pace and abundant opportunities, was like a wide-open canvas, inviting them to paint their shared dreams. Jacob quickly found the perfect location to open his therapy practice in downtown Los Angeles. He poured his heart and soul into creating a warm and professional space where every patient who walked in felt understood and cared for. In the early days, Jacob worked tirelessly to perfect everything from the clinic's interior design to the selection of his staff. With his dedication and exceptional skills, he quickly built a reputation in the community. Locals sought out his practice for help, not only because of his professionalism but also because of the kind heart that Jacob brought to his work. Meanwhile, Emily began her teaching career at an elementary school near her home. With a love for children and a passion for education, she quickly won the hearts of her students and colleagues. Emily not only brought knowledge to her students, but also love and inspiration. Her classes were always filled with laughter, creativity, and life lessons. She often told Jacob about memorable moments in class, such as when a student unexpectedly gave her a thoughtful doodle, or when the whole class laughed out loud at a silly joke. Despite their busy schedules, Jacob and Emily always made time for each other. In the evenings, they often walked together on the brightly lit streets of Los Angeles, or relaxed together in their cozy apartment. They shared stories of the day, cooked together, and sometimes just sat silently next to each other, enjoying the peace that love brought. A year after their marriage, Jacob and Emily welcomed their first daughter, Sophie Simmons, in the spring of 1996. Sophie's arrival was a great joy, bringing a new lease of life to the Simmons family. Jacob, the father who experienced the feeling of holding his daughter in his arms for the first time, could not hide his emotions, while Emily quickly immersed herself in the role of mother, devotedly taking care of Sophie in the smallest things. In the early years, the Simmons family lived in simple but complete happiness. Jacob, despite his busy work at the therapy clinic, always arranged time to be with his wife and child. He often returned home in the evening, read books to Sophie, or lulled the child to sleep with Emily. On weekends, The three of them often go to the park or join small picnics, enjoying every happy moment together. 4 years later, in 2000, Jacob and Emily welcomed a new member, their second daughter, Mia Simmons. The birth of Mia completed the joy of the family. Sophie, now 4 years old, was excited about her role as the older sister. She clung to her younger sister, helping her mother with small tasks, such as giving her a bottle or looking after her younger sibling, while Emily did housework. Together, Jacob and Emily created a loving and warm environment for Sophie and Mia. Jacob, with his medical job, was not only a devoted father but also a close friend of the children. Emily, with her thoughtfulness and ingenuity, always organized fun activities at home. There were evenings when the whole family gathered to bake cakes or draw together, creating unforgettable memories. However, nothing lasts forever, and in 2008 an economic crisis occurred, causing hidden waves to creep into the seemingly peaceful life of Jacob and Emily. Jacob's therapy clinic, once crowded with trusting customers, now became quiet. The friendly smiles and bustle that were present every day were gradually replaced by flickering lights and old calendars that had not been changed. Customers gradually dwindled, many people had to cut back on spending, and therapy services became one of the first luxuries to be eliminated. Jacob tried to keep the clinic going by all means. He constantly offered discounts, even organized free therapy sessions to retain customers. But all those efforts only brought in a trickle of revenue, not enough to cover the costs of operating the clinic, paying staff salaries, and especially the bank loans he had used to expand the facility before. Financial pressure quickly spread to their home. Jacob and Emily had 2 young children, and their school fees became a heavy burden. Dinners that were once filled with laughter were replaced by tense discussions about bills, rent, and how to cut costs. Jacob, who had once been the strong man of the family, now felt like a small boat being tossed about by the waves. As the difficulties mounted, Jacob began to sink into a state of anxiety. He spent hours at his desk, staring at numbers on paper, unable to find a solution. Sleepless nights became the norm. His eyes, which once sparkled with enthusiasm, were sunken and tired. Emily noticed that Jacob was changing. He talked less, smiled less, and sometimes lost focus at home. She tried to comfort him, reassuring him that they would get through this together, but her optimism was not enough to dispel the darkness in Jacob's mind. Jacob's depression became more severe. On weekends, instead of taking his children to the park like before, he often sat alone in the living room, staring into space. Feelings of failure and helplessness surrounded him. As a person who had devoted his career to helping others escape psychological pain, now he could not save himself. In late 2008, when his financial situation seemed to be getting worse, Jacob discovered a terrible secret: he had not paid his taxes in full for many years. This mistake was not intentional, but the result of careless financial management during the period of focusing on expanding the clinic. However, that did not change the fact that he was now facing huge debts and serious warnings from the tax authorities. Letters demanding payment quickly piled up on his desk. Jacob received official notice that if he did not settle the debt, his family's assets, including the house they lived in, would be seized. Feelings of helplessness and fear surrounded him every hour. Anxiety attacks constantly haunted him, often keeping him awake at night, holding debt collection notices in his hand and his mind blank. Emily, with the sensitivity of a loving and caring wife, quickly realized Jacob's mental collapse. She tried to reassure him, encouraging him that they could get through this together. Emily even offered to sell some of her prized possessions to help ease the financial pressure. But for Jacob, that brought no relief. He felt like he had betrayed her trust, no longer worthy of her love and sacrifice. In February 2009, Jacob reached his limit. The pressure piled up, causing him to withdraw more and more, avoiding conversations with Emily and the 2 children. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, Jacob sat with Emily in a heavy atmosphere of tension. His eyes were bloodshot, his face was haggard, his voice was trembling. He confessed to her that he had thought about ending his life. He believed that the only way to free his family from the burden was to take Emily and the 2 daughters with him. Emily was stunned by Jacob's words. Her heart stopped when she heard her husband, who had been a symbol of strength and love, have such a terrible thought. Jacob explained that he could not imagine anyone else taking better care of the two children than he and Emily. In his disturbed mind, taking the whole family along was the only way to protect them from future financial and emotional harm. Emily, though in a panic, tried to stay calm. She knew that overreacting could put Jacob in even more danger. She looked him in the eye, held his hand, and told him that she understood he was feeling stuck, but that this was not the answer. Emily pleaded with Jacob to give her a chance to help him through this difficult time. She reminded him of the love they had for each other, of their two daughters who needed their parents, and of what it meant to be a father. But deep down, Emily knew that she needed to do more than just offer words of encouragement. The very next day, she secretly contacted a therapist friend who had worked with Jacob to seek support. However, on March 15, 2009, all the feelings of despair, stress, and pressure pushed Jacob to his breaking point. In the darkness of the early morning, while the rest of the family was still sleeping peacefully, Jacob quietly got out of bed and walked down to the kitchen. He opened a drawer and took out a sharp kitchen knife, the metal glinting in the dim light, as if in sympathy with the terrible decision he was about to make. Jacob trudged toward Emily's bedroom. He paused at the door, clutching the knife, conflicting thoughts racing through his mind. But financial pressure, guilt, and the twisted belief that this would free his family from suffering clouded his judgment. When he entered the room, Jacob stood still for a moment, watching Emily sleep soundly. Memories of their first meeting, the happiness of their wedding, and the warm moments with their two children flashed through his mind. But in that moment, a sense of helplessness and darkness overwhelmed everything. Jacob approached the bed and stabbed straight at Emily. Emily woke up, hurt and panicked. She tried to fight back, pushing Jacob's hand away, but his strength and cold determination did not allow her to escape. The noise of the struggle woke Sophie, the eldest daughter, in the next room. Sophie, a 12-year-old girl, rushed into the hallway, sleepy and confused. But the sight before her eyes made her freeze, her mother lying motionless on the bed, blood flowing everywhere, and her father standing there with a blood-stained knife. Sophie screamed, and for a moment Jacob's eyes wavered. But then despair overwhelmed him again. He lunged at Sophie as she tried to escape. Jacob grabbed Sophie at the top of the stairs. Her screams echoed throughout the house, but no one heard. Sophie tried to fight back, clawing at her father's hands, but she couldn't escape the overwhelming force. A stab ended her scream, and Sophie collapsed to the floor, her eyes filled with fear and helplessness. In the small room at the end of the hallway, Mia, the youngest daughter, who was only 6 years old, had woken up from the strange noise. She sat huddled in the corner of the bed, hugging her teddy bear tightly, her whole body trembling. When Jacob entered, Mia didn't scream, but just sobbed, tears rolling down her innocent face. Jacob froze at Mia's gaze. It seemed that for a moment his humanity returned, and he knelt before his daughter. But the knife in his hand was a harsh reminder of what he had done. "I'm sorry," he whispered, and then he stabbed one last time. Mia fell back onto the bed, her eyes still dazed, as if she didn't understand what had happened. When it was over, the house fell into a deadly silence. Jacob stood there, panting, his hands shaking, the bloody knife falling to the floor. He returned to the living room, where the family photos hung on the walls as a painful reminder of what he had just taken. Jacob sat down on the sofa, looking around one last time. In his twisted mind, he believed he had freed his family from the pain that weighed them down. He picked up the knife again, placed the blade against his chest, and stabbed it straight into his heart. Jacob fell to the floor, blood flowing everywhere, joining the terrible haunting that pervaded the house. That morning the sunlight was soft through the windows, but no one in the house was awake to greet the new day. Around 9 a.m., Linda Taylor, the Simmons' longtime neighbor, began to worry. Normally Emily would have taken the children outside or been busy in the garden. Sophie and Mia's bright laughter would often be heard early, but today the house was completely silent. Linda looked through her window, but saw no sign of life inside the house. At first she thought that maybe the Simmons family had gone out early, but their car was still parked in the garage. The unusual silence made her uneasy. Deciding to investigate, Linda walked over to Jacob and Emily's house. She knocked on the door, calling loudly, but no one answered. Unease rising in her heart, Linda walked around to the living room window. What she saw inside made her whole body freeze. Through the glass, Linda saw Jacob's body lying on the floor. Blood soaked through his shirt and stained the wooden floor. For a moment, Linda wanted to believe that it was just a scene from a horror movie, but the strong smell of blood wafting through the window made her realize that this was the terrible reality. Linda panicked and stepped back, her hands shaking as she took the phone from her pocket to call the police immediately. At approximately 9:30 a.m., on March 15, 2009, Los Angeles police officers arrived at the Simmons family home after receiving an emergency call from Linda Taylor, a neighbor concerned about the unusual silence. Police cars pulled up in front of the house, their lights flashing in the windows, casting a chilly mid-morning glow. The officers got out, bracing themselves for what awaited them inside. When they broke down the front door to enter the house, the sight that greeted even the most seasoned cops was enough to make them shudder. In the living room, Jacob's body lay sprawled on the floor, a large pool of blood surrounding his body. The bloody kitchen knife was still near his hand, a gruesome reminder of what had happened. The police continued to move inside, checking each room. In the master bedroom, they found Emily's body on the bed, with multiple fatal wounds to her body. Her face still bore the marks of panic and pain from her final moments. In the other bedroom, Sophie and Mia, the family's two daughters, were found in similar conditions, lying motionless in a space that had been full of life just hours before. The atmosphere at the scene was heavy and suffocating. Forensic officers were quickly called to examine the scene and collect evidence. During the investigation, they discovered several important documents placed on Jacob's desk. These papers included unpaid bills, warning letters from the tax authorities, and a suicide note written by Jacob himself, placed in a sealed envelope. In the letter, Jacob admitted to all his actions and explained the reasons that led to the tragedy. He wrote that the financial pressures on his shoulders had left him feeling completely helpless. The loss of financial control, the fear of not being able to care for his wife and children, and the feeling of failure as a father and husband had pushed him into a deep pit of despair. Jacob believed that killing his family was the only way to free them all from the suffering that he believed would continue if he continued to live. The words in the suicide note not only revealed Jacob's breakdown, but also revealed a distorted belief in love and responsibility. Jacob could not bear the thought of leaving his family in the hands of a society he saw as hopeless. "I tried my best, but I failed," he wrote. "I could not bear to see them suffer any longer. This was the only way to keep them safe and with me forever." Investigators also found fragmentary notes in Jacob's personal notebooks that suggested he had planned his actions in advance. The scribbles were scribbled and full of contradictions, but all revolved around the idea that death was the best solution. The investigation of the crime scene lasted all day, and the police ultimately concluded that the murder had been premeditated. There was no sign of a third party or anyone else involved. Jacob was the sole perpetrator, and his actions were a direct result of deep despair and psychological distress. In the end, there was no trial, as all the witnesses and the perpetrators were no longer alive. The Simmons family home became a haunting reminder of the devastating effects of mental stress and isolation. The story ended in tragedy, with a family once filled with love and hope now plunged into irreparable darkness. Story 3. Las Vegas, the city of lights, known as the entertainment capital of the world. But behind the glittering glitz of the glittering casinos and sleepless streets is the darkness of crime that always lurks. On June 1, 2018, during a dream trip to the United States, 2 Vietnamese tourists were found dead under mysterious circumstances at the Circus Hotel. The horrific injuries on their bodies, the missing property, and the suspicious images from security cameras turned the case into a horrifying mystery that shook both sides of the Pacific. What happened in that 21st floor hotel room? Who was the killer? And how did he escape the notice of security guards at one of Las Vegas' largest hotel complexes? Join Crime MKT as we reopen each page of the file, follow each clue, and discover the haunting truth behind this shocking case. On the afternoon of May 31st, 2018, a group of Vietnamese tourists organized by True How Company headquartered in District 1, Ho Chi Minh City arrived in Las Vegas on a journey to explore the United States. According to the schedule, the group would stay in this city for 2 nights before returning to Los Angeles on June 3rd to return to Vietnam. However, after just 1 night, the dream trip turned into a nightmare when 2 members of the group mysteriously disappeared. On the morning of June 1st, 2018, the group planned to visit the Grand Canyon National Park, but 2 people Ms. Ania Bui, Sang director of True How Company, and Mr. Nguyen La Ba Cum tour guide were not present at the meeting point. After many unsuccessful attempts to contact them, the group members asked the hotel staff to check the room. When the door opened, a horrifying scene appeared. Both victims were dead, with many serious injuries on their bodies. According to hotel staff, at around 2 a.m., there was a loud argument coming from the 2 victims' room, but no one intervened out of respect for privacy. Initially, the police suspected that this was a murder due to an internal conflict, but the injuries showed that it was unlikely that either of them had inflicted the injuries on themselves. The incident quickly sent the entire group into a panic. The dream trip turned into a real nightmare. As investigators continue to investigate, the question remains, were the deaths of the 2 victims due to conflicts within the group? Similar cases have occurred in history, where the perpetrator lured the victim to a faraway place to commit the crime. To eliminate suspicion, Las Vegas police and the FBI conducted independent interviews with each member of the group. They examined in detail every individual's activity on the night of May 31st, tracking down anyone who had contact with the 2 victims. Since both Ms. Sang and Mr. Kwong were visiting the United States for the first time, the hypothesis of internal conflict was carefully considered. Although the statements all matched and showed no signs of abnormality, the police still had to admit a harsh reality. Las Vegas, the City of Lights, is always covered by the ghosts of criminals waiting to commit crimes. Despite the language barrier, the interviews with the Vietnamese tour group members were completed and thoroughly analyzed by the police. Most of the interviews provided detailed information about the group's itinerary and confirmed that the remaining individuals had not had contact with the 2 victims after they checked in and had dinner. In these interviews, many expressed regret for being too subjective when they did not see the 2 victims on the morning of June 1st. They thought that perhaps Nia Bui Sang and Nguyen La Ba Quang needed to rest after a long journey, and that their busy schedule at the Grand Canyon National Park had swept them away without further investigation. These statements, after being verified, did not reveal anything unusual and did not provide any clues to explain the deaths of the 2 tourists. However, when checking their room, the police discovered that many expensive assets such as mobile phones, jewelry, watches, credit cards, and even Vietnamese cash had completely disappeared. This clearly showed signs of a robbery. According to Lieutenant Ray Spencer of the Las Vegas Police Department, the suspect may have accidentally encountered the 2 victims while breaking into the room to steal. To cover up the clues, he killed them and quickly escaped. But the biggest question remains, who is the suspect in this bustling city that never sleeps but is also full of criminal ghosts? Security cameras at the Circus Hotel, where the victims stayed, provided images of a suspicious man. This is a famous hotel and casino complex in Las Vegas, especially with a bustling casino at night. The room where the murder took place was on the 21st floor. The camera recorded the image of a black man, about 25 to 30 years old, wearing a gray-blue t-shirt, black Adidas shoes, and especially a tribal or dragon head tattoo visible under the collar. According to security footage, at around 4 a.m. on June 1st, the suspect entered the elevator and went to the top floor of the hotel. About 45 minutes later, he reappeared from the 21st floor carrying a backpack similar to the male victims. During the trip, he appeared calm, texting and making phone calls while wearing the backpack. He then went to another room in the hotel, where a woman was waiting. The 2 quickly left the hotel with a lot of luggage, then got into a taxi and disappeared into the crowded traffic of Las Vegas. It seemed that all traces of him disappeared with the taxi, leaving behind a mysterious case in this city that never sleeps. Circus Circus is a famous hotel and casino complex, long operating in Las Vegas, with highly rated management and security procedures. It is difficult to understand that a stranger could arbitrarily open the hotel room door and break in, seemingly breaking all the security standards that have been maintained here for a long time. However, MGM Resorts, the management company of Circus Circus, affirmed that security staff checked the door of the room on the 21st floor on the night of the murder and found nothing unusual. As a rule, all room doors are checked to make sure they are securely latched. There were no reports of doors being opened or damaged that night. But as part of the investigation, police discovered that the door to the hotel room where the two Vietnamese tourists stayed was not properly closed. The latch was defective, allowing anyone to push the door open to get inside. Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department Lieutenant Ray Spencer said a preliminary investigation found no signs of tampering with the door, suggesting the suspect could have easily gained entry by simply pushing the door open. Circus Circus had offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to the suspect's identification, but so far no one had come forward with any meaningful leads. However, one particular detail in the hotel's security video caught the attention of the police: a tribal tattoo or dragon head visible under the suspect's collar. The camera captured the image, and the detail quickly led police to a similar criminal profile. In May 2018, an 81-year-old woman was attacked by a stranger at the Four Queens Casino Hotel and Casino who robbed her of her jewelry and wallet. Tattoos under her collar captured on camera at the Circus Circus incident matched a suspect with a criminal record. Detectives quickly identified the suspect as D'Angelo Trotter, 31, of Los Angeles. Trotter is no stranger to the authorities. According to FBI records, he was sentenced in 2017 to 4 years in prison and 5 years of probation for using a weapon against a law enforcement officer. However, he was given probation. After the attack in Four Queens, a court issued a warrant for Trotter's arrest in June 2018 for violating his probation. When the Circus Circus incident occurred, police released Trotter's photo from his 2017 arrest, and the tattoo under his collar once again matched, further strengthening the evidence identifying him as the perpetrator in the robbery and murder of two Vietnamese tourists. However, D'Angelo Trotter's movements were unpredictable. After June 1, 2018, he disappeared like a ghost from Las Vegas. Police and the FBI launched multiple campaigns, checking all suspicious locations and tracking transactions from the victim's credit cards, but all yielded no clues. All hope seemed dim until the early morning of June 2nd, when police spotted a suspicious taxi. At around 5:30 a.m. on June 2nd, a taxi carrying D'Angelo Trotter and a woman left the Circus Circus Hotel and stopped at the Palms Hotel, located at 4321 West Flamingo Road. There, the couple rented a room, and D'Angelo used his casino membership card to pay. By comparing the Palms security camera footage with the Circus Circus videos, police confirmed that the man in both videos was D'Angelo Trotter. However, the search continued. On June 7th, the FBI received information that D'Angelo was present at a house on Derby Avenue, Chino, California. After receiving this information, the FBI quickly coordinated with local police to approach the area. As the police car approached, a suspicious car suddenly rushed out of the house. This car was driven by a woman with a man inside. Detecting unusual signs, the police immediately decided to pursue. The car sped off at high speed, forcing the authorities to launch a fierce chase through the streets. When they reached the Chino Hills Hotel, about 9:00 a.m. from the scene, the man in the car tried to escape. However, after only a few minutes, he was subdued and arrested by the police. The identity of this man was confirmed to be D'Angelo Trotter, the prime suspect in the murder of two Vietnamese tourists. The woman driving the car was identified as Itasca Lavin, his girlfriend, and was also arrested later. After D'Angelo Trotter was arrested in Chino Hills, police immediately returned to the home he had frequented to search. The goal was to look for evidence that could be linked to the case, including the murder weapon, the victim's property, or any items that could shed light on the murder. Police also hoped to find evidence that Trotter had a connection to the victims before the murders. Neighbors said D'Angelo Trotter was not an official resident of the house. They said he only stopped by occasionally, possibly to see friends or his girlfriend. In fact, as police investigated further, they discovered that Trotter had been in several other places in California before showing up at the Derby Avenue house. This raised suspicions about his whereabouts and also suggested that he may have planned his escape. After arresting Trotter, police obtained several important clues. Investigators discovered several documents and personal items belonging to the victims in the house, including wallets, phones, and other valuables that the victims had brought with them to Las Vegas. They also found a gun, which is believed to be the weapon used in the case. However, due to the lack of concrete evidence linking Trotter to the murder, police continued to work with forensic agencies to strengthen the evidence. After the evidence was collected and verified, D'Angelo Trotter was extradited from California to Nevada. In Nevada, he faces 5 charges, including 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of robbery. These charges are directly related to the murders of Nguyen Boi Sang and Nguyen Lu Bac Quang, 2 Vietnamese tourists who were murdered at the Circus Hotel on June 1, 2018. Trotter is also charged with 1 count of theft when he took the victim's property. Trotter is being held without bail, facing only the harshest sentence. Prosecutors have identified him as the prime suspect in the case, and the loss of the 2 Vietnamese tourists is an unforgettable tragedy. Meanwhile, Trotter's girlfriend, Itasca Lavin, was also arrested. She is suspected of being involved in assisting him in the escape and may have helped him cover his tracks. Although there is not enough evidence to confirm her role in the case, Itasca Lavin was arrested and her bail was set at $100,000. However, she still denies any involvement in the victims' deaths and claims that she was present at the time of the incident. These events marked a major turning point in the investigation, as police officially identified D'Angelo Trotter as the main perpetrator in the murder and robbery case. Although Trotter has yet to plead guilty in court, the evidence gathered is gradually bringing him closer to his sentence. After being arrested and extradited to Nevada, D'Angelo Trotter faced serious charges in connection with the murders of Vietnamese tourists Nguyen Boi Sang and Nguyen Lu Bac Quang. In September 2018, Trotter appeared in 3 separate Las Vegas courtrooms, where he was charged with murder, robbery, and burglary. The initial trial in September 2018 focused on charges related to the murder and robbery of 2 victims. Prosecutors detailed a strong case, including witness testimony, security camera footage, and victim property found in Trotter's home. The items, including wallets, cell phones, and jewelry, belonged to the robbery victims. Detectives also found traces of weapons that could be linked to the crime. However, Trotter pleaded not guilty throughout the trial and continued to deny the charges. The second trial in late September 2018 focused on the theft charges. Prosecutors argued that Trotter not only murdered the victims but also stole valuables from their rooms at the Circus Hotel. These items were then taken with Trotter during his escape. In particular, the victims' credit cards were used to pay for services at other casinos in the Las Vegas area. These details further supported Trotter's allegations of theft and showed that he had been well prepared before committing the crime. In late November 2018, after the preliminary hearings concluded, Nevada prosecutors began considering seeking the death penalty for D'Angelo Trotter. Both victims were brutally murdered, and the circumstances of the case indicated the nature of the crimes was particularly serious. Trotter was said to have acted intentionally, killing to cover up clues while committing a robbery. His actions were also determined to be inhumane and unforgivable. However, Trotter's defense attorneys argued that he may not have been able to discern right from wrong at the time of the crime due to psychological problems he had suffered growing up. They asserted that Trotter was not completely out of control, but that psychological factors may have contributed to the violence in his behavior. On July 17, 2019, Judge Michelle Livid decided to uphold the charges against D'Angelo Trotter in the murder of 2 Vietnamese tourists. The judge confirmed that the evidence gathered was strong enough for Trotter to continue to face charges of murder and robbery. In his decision, Judge Livid emphasized that the seriousness of the case did not stop at murder but also robbery with a clear motive for profit. Judge Livid also ordered a further investigation into the possibility that Trotter could face the death penalty. The prosecutor has stressed that the case falls under the category of serious crimes, which would prevent Trotter from receiving a light sentence. Given the brutal nature of the case and the brutality of Trotter's murder, legal experts believe that the case will be one of the most complex and high-profile trials in the community. While D'Angelo Trotter has not yet pleaded guilty and the debate over the severity of his sentence continues, the trials have set a precedent for how serious crimes are handled in Las Vegas. The case has shocked the community, not only because of the brutality of the crime, but also because of the complexity of the investigation and trial. Although D'Angelo Trotter has been arrested and faces a harsh sentence, the pain of the victim's family cannot be appeased. From the foreign land of Las Vegas to the small house in Kanjuak District, Long and Province, the loss that the family of Mrs. Nia Boysang and Mr. Nguyen Lubac Quang have to bear is indescribable. Tears still fall for a long time, not only because of the painful death of their loved ones, but also because of the brutality and inhumanity. Throughout the trial, D'Angelo Trotter's defense attorneys made several mitigating arguments. One of the most controversial was that prosecutors had intentionally failed to inform the jury of the possibility of another suspect. However, Judge Michelle Livid rejected this argument, stating that Trotter had been fully informed of the evidence against him and could have testified in his defense if he had wanted to. Prosecutor Ben Flynn emphasized that Trotter had ample time and opportunity to plead his case. However, he chose to remain silent, which made his guilt all the more clear. The prosecutor argued that the authorities had no obligation to inform the jury of Trotter's statements if they were unreliable, such as his claim that he regularly bought stolen goods and that the backpack, a key piece of evidence, had been given to him by a man named Jason. These statements were not convincing and did not change the nature of the case in any way. Another factor that weighed against Trotter was the testimony of his girlfriend, Itasca Lavin. Lavin said she saw Trotter walking down the hotel hallway, trying each door to find one that was unlocked. She did not mind that Trotter was carrying a backpack containing a woman's wallet, 2 men's wallets, a cell phone, jewelry, a watch, and Vietnamese currency, all of which were later confirmed to be the victim's property. In her testimony, Lavin admitted that she had fled with Trotter after the murders, but denied any involvement in the deaths of the 2 Vietnamese tourists. However, Lavin's silence and nonchalant attitude made her testimony suspect in the eyes of judges and prosecutors. She had no reasonable explanation for not questioning the items Trotter was carrying, which were identified as the property of the victims of the Circus Hotel murders. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Judge Michelle Livid decided to uphold the indictment against D'Angelo Trotter. Trotter faces serious charges, including murder, robbery, and burglary, which carry a potential death sentence. The decision reflects the severity of the law when it comes to brutal criminals like Trotter, who not only take the lives of others, but also violate the rights of their victims in a cold and callous manner. Las Vegas, with its glittering lights and vibrant atmosphere, is now a painful memory, reminding us that not all trips end with happy memories. Crime has claimed 2 lives, but justice, however belated, is always the last hope for those who have been hurt. Story 4. Mumbai, one of India's most vibrant cities, witnessed a shocking family tragedy in 2009. In a quiet residential area of Bandra, police discovered a horrific scene inside the Desai family's luxurious apartment. What happened behind closed doors shocked the public and left the nation asking what could have driven a seemingly perfect family into such a brutal tragedy. The darkness that lurks deep within this family relationship remains a mystery that no one dares to face. Mahesh Desai, 62, was once an excellent project engineer in Mumbai, with decades of experience participating in large infrastructure projects of national importance. He was respected by his colleagues not only for his expertise but also for his skillful human resource management skills. However, after more than 30 years of working, Mahesh decided to retire early when he realized that life was something he had never truly enjoyed. The Desai family owned a significant amount of assets from real estate investments over many generations, and Mahesh felt it was time for him to spend time managing these assets more proactively. His memories of his youth are always associated with one named Nihai. Mahesh first met Nihai Desai through his family's introduction on a warm afternoon at a local community function. At that time, Nihai was a young high school teacher, full of enthusiasm for her profession. With her long black hair and gentle smile, she quickly caught Mahesh's attention. Mahesh himself was an ambitious young man, often busy with construction projects everywhere. However, Nihai's calmness and intelligence made him, for the first time, feel his heart conquered. With the encouragement of both families, Mahesh and Nihai started dating. The short meetings often took place at small cafes or parks near Nihai's teaching place. They talked about everything from career dreams to simple wishes like building a home full of laughter. It was in those moments that Mahesh realized that Nihai was not only an ideal wife but also a companion he could rely on in any situation. Soon, the two decided to get married. Their wedding, held at a traditional temple, was not lavish but filled with warmth and blessings from friends and family. After their wedding, Mahesh and Nihai moved into a small house in the suburbs of Mumbai, where they started building their life. The house was small but filled with love. Nihai continued her teaching career, while Mahesh was busy with projects in the city center. Their mornings begin with a cup of hot tea that Nihai makes, accompanied by small stories about her students. Every time Mahesh returns home after a stressful day at work, he always sees the warm light in the house and the familiar smell of food from the kitchen. Mahesh and Nihai's married life is a picture of happiness and color. Together they build their home little by little in a small house in the suburbs of Mumbai. The love and harmony between the two is a solid foundation for them to overcome the early challenges of marriage. And then, after only a year of living together, their joy was doubled when they welcomed their first child, a cute baby boy named Rajiv. Rajiv's birth was like a bright spot that illuminated the small family. From the moment Rajiv first cried, Nihai and Mahesh devoted all their love to the boy. The sleepless nights spent trying to comfort their crying baby, the bursts of laughter when Rajiv took his first steps, all those moments filled their lives with simple happiness. Growing up, Rajiv was loved and cared for by his parents. Mahesh, despite his busy work as a project manager, always took time every night to tell his son stories about the outside world, stimulating his imagination. Nihai, with her teacher's instincts, not only taught Rajiv the basics but also trained him to be disciplined and respectful of others. Rajiv was a smart, well-behaved boy. From primary school to high school, he always achieved good results. The certificates and medals hanging on the walls were a source of pride for Nihai and Mahesh. They often bragged about their son to their friends and neighbors, and the constant compliments from everyone made them even more proud. However, when Rajiv grew up, things began to change. After graduating from high school with excellent results, Rajiv was admitted to a prestigious college in Mumbai. It was a great joy for the Desai family. But the great expectations soon turned into disappointment when Rajiv dropped out of school. Initially, Mahesh and Nihai could not understand the reason. Rajiv explained that he wanted to pursue a different path, but in reality he had no clear plan. From then on, Rajiv gradually became lazy, selfish, and ambitious, but lacked the patience to achieve any goals. He did not look for a job and was completely dependent on his family. Mahesh, who was a strict but loving father, tried to talk to and advise Rajiv, but his words were ignored. Nihai, heartbroken by the change in her son, often tried to protect Rajiv from Mahesh's anger. However, she could not deny that Rajiv had disappointed them both. Rajiv began to exhibit habits that worried his parents. He spent money without thinking, engaged in frivolous fun with friends without thinking about the future. He even blamed his parents for having high expectations of him, saying that they were the reason for his stress and failure. Those words were like knives stabbing Nihai and Mahesh's hearts. Despite their disappointment, Mahesh and Nihai did not give up hope that Rajiv would change. Mahesh tried to introduce his son to a job in a company owned by an old friend, but Rajiv only lasted a few months before quitting, citing that the job was boring and not suitable for him. Each time Mahesh's patience wore a little thinner, while Nihai felt more and more helpless. In 2009, after years of frustration with Rajiv's laziness and dependence, Mahesh and Nihai decided to take a major step to protect their lives in their later years. The large apartment in Mumbai, where they had lived for more than 3 decades, was put up for sale. This decision was not only out of a desire to live in a smaller, more comfortable space to enjoy his old age, but also as a way to cut costs and reduce Rajiv's dependence on their subsidies. When he informed Rajiv of this decision, his reaction was immediate and severe. "How could you do this to me?" Rajiv shouted, his eyes blazing with anger. For him, the apartment was not just an asset, but also a symbol of financial security that he had always taken for granted. His parents moved to a smaller house, and the announcement of a reduction in allowance made Rajiv feel betrayed. He could not accept that they were trying to shirk their responsibility towards him. Mahesh, though still calm and serious, could not hide the disappointment in his voice. "Rajiv, you are an adult. It is time for you to take care of yourself. We cannot rely on you forever." Those words, although coming from a place of love and good wishes, became a fuse in Rajiv's heart. In the following time, Rajiv sank deeper into anger and despair. He began to avoid his parents, skipping family meals and often leaving home without notice. A cruel plan began to form in Rajiv's mind. He realized that if he could not rely on his parents, the only way to get his fortune was to eliminate them. Rajiv began to research carefully how to cover up his crime. He searched the internet for information on murder cases and how to fake a crime scene, even visiting online forums to ask vague but sinister questions. In the evenings, when Nihai and Mahesh thought their son was asleep, Rajiv was actually planning every detail in an old notebook, where he jotted down his steps. To prepare for his plan, Rajiv tried to be nicer to his parents, even though he was lying. He began to spend time closely observing their habits, what time they went to bed, when they were home alone, and even where they kept their financial documents. One day, Rajiv accidentally discovered that his parents had a small safe in their bedroom. When they were away, he sneaked into the room and tried to open the safe, but failed. However, this only strengthened Rajiv's resolve. He was certain that inside the safe were valuables that he believed belonged to him. Nihai, despite loving her son, began to sense a change in Rajiv's behavior. There were times when she saw his eyes become so distant and cold that she did not recognize the son she once held dear. She shared her concerns with Mahesh, but he dismissed Nihai as being overly sensitive. Mahesh still hoped that the reduction in allowance would make Rajiv change and become more mature. But they did not know that it was in this house that Rajiv had planned to kill his parents and inherit their fortune, including a multi-million rupee apartment and a considerable amount of savings. On November 27, 2009, the Desai family home was decorated for the festival of Diwali. The flickering oil lamps, colorful garlands, and the sweet aroma of traditional dishes created a seemingly cozy atmosphere. Mahesh Desai, in a more relaxed mood than usual, was sitting in the living room, waiting for his wife Nihai to return from the market. Rajiv, their only son, was especially cheerful, in contrast to his usual lethargic and indifferent demeanor. He expressed his desire to talk to his father privately about financial matters. Looking very serious and sincere, Mahesh agreed without any doubt. He had always hoped that his son would change, that he would start taking more care of his responsibilities. He stood up and followed Rajiv to the second floor, where his office was located. This room, where Mahesh kept many important documents, was a space he cherished. When he entered, Mahesh did not notice the cold gaze behind him. Rajiv had prepared in advance. A sharp knife was hidden in his pocket. When Mahesh turned around to open the drawer to take out the financial documents, Rajiv suddenly pulled out the knife and attacked his father. The blade penetrated Mahesh's body for the first time, causing him to scream in pain and surprise. He tried to turn around to fight back, but Rajiv continued to stab him relentlessly. Each stab was performed with the strength of a man blinded by greed and anger. He stabbed his father more than 40 times, causing blood to flow continuously, soaking the floor. Mahesh's gasps gradually died away as his body collapsed to the floor. The room that was once a place of peaceful memories was now overshadowed by a horrifying scene. Rajiv, now no longer the beloved son Mahesh had once been proud of, just stood there panting, his cold eyes looking down at his father's motionless body. After making sure that Mahesh was dead, Rajiv started cleaning the room. He knew that time was running out, as Neha could return at any moment. As he walked downstairs, the door opened, signaling that Neha had returned from the market. Neha had just entered the house, carrying a bag of groceries, when Rajiv immediately blocked her way at the stairs. She saw blood on her son's shirt and was horrified to realize that something was wrong. But before she could react, Rajiv pounced on her. The sharp blade once again became the instrument of the crime. Neha tried to escape, but in the narrow space of the stairs, she had no chance. Rajiv stabbed his mother more than 30 times, each time releasing the rage that had been building up inside him for a long time. Blood flowed down each step, soaking into the carpet that Neha had carefully chosen. Finally, her body collapsed right on the stairs, her eyes wide open, as if asking her son an unspoken question why Rajiv stood on the stairs, looking down at his mother's body, his mind blank. But he didn't let his emotions control him for too long. Instead, he set about executing his plan. He dragged in Neha and Mahesh's bodies into the basement, where he had prepared large containers and chemicals purchased earlier. This was a crucial step in Rajiv's plan to erase all traces. He began dismembering his parents with crude but effective tools. The creepy sounds echoed in the cramped basement, the sound of knives cutting through flesh, the sound of bones breaking, and the sound of chemicals boiling as they came into contact with the bodies. The smell of blood mixed with the chemicals was overwhelming, but Rajiv did not stop. He placed each body part into containers and poured chemicals over them. The smaller body parts, especially his mother's head, were treated separately. Rajiv placed Neha's head in a large pot on the stove. He turned the stove on high, thinking that this would help him quickly erase the evidence. The pot on the stove became a horrifying symbol of Rajiv's barbaric act. While the house was still lit up with Diwali lights, inside, the horrific crime was being committed with a brutality no one could have imagined. Once he finished disposing of the body, Rajiv meticulously cleaned the scene. He collected all the blood-stained clothes and burned them in the stove. The blood stains on the floor, on the stairs, and in Mahesh's office were all carefully cleaned. To cover up his parents' absence, Rajiv sent text messages from their phones, creating a story that they were visiting relatives for a few days. On November 29, 2009, the peaceful atmosphere of the Desai family's residential area was shattered by a strong stench that permeated the hallways in neighboring apartments. Neighbors initially thought it might be garbage left somewhere, but the smell became unbearable. Some people, worried that something was wrong, called the police to investigate. When the police arrived, they realized that the stench was coming from the Desai family's apartment. The door was locked and no one answered when they knocked. The suspicious silence and the stench coming from the crack in the door forced the police to break the lock to enter. When the door was opened, the scene inside left investigators shuddering. In the kitchen, they found a large pot on the stove with still warm water. On inspection, the police were horrified to find Neha's head inside, indicating it had been boiling for hours. On the floor, dried blood stains led from the stairs to the basement, creating a terrifying journey that investigators were forced to follow. The basement contained the most gruesome evidence. There, they found chemical containers with dismembered body parts soaked in liquid. The smell of chemicals mixed with the stench of corpses, creating a suffocating space. Body parts that had not yet completely decomposed emerged from the containers, like gruesome pieces of a haunting picture. Around them, tools such as knives, hand saws, and rubber gloves were scattered, attesting to the meticulous preparation of the perpetrator. While searching the second floor, the police discovered another important detail, a small notebook that had been carefully kept in Rajiv's room. Inside, the notebook was carefully handwritten, detailing the plan for the crime, from killing his parents, disposing of the bodies, to covering up the traces. The notebook not only recorded the steps but also showed the cold and calculating nature of the perpetrator. The pages filled with dark calculations became undeniable evidence, pointing to Rajiv as the prime suspect. The police immediately launched a manhunt for Rajiv, but he was not present at the scene. A quick investigation was carried out with the help of neighbors and surveillance cameras. It was soon determined that Rajiv had left the house earlier, but there were signs that he would return to finish what he had left unfinished. As expected, on the evening of November 29th, Rajiv drove back to the apartment. As he approached, he was immediately surrounded by police and arrested. There was no trace of panic or remorse on Rajiv's face, only a cold expression as if he had been prepared for this. When police searched Rajiv's car, they continued to find important evidence. In the trunk, they found a large meat grinder, a scalpel, new rubber gloves, and additional bags of chemicals. These items indicated his intention to continue disposing of the body, and also reinforced the argument that Rajiv had meticulously planned his crimes. Returning to the apartment to carry out the final steps of his plan, Rajiv was surprised to find that the police had discovered the entire crime. He was immediately handcuffed and taken to the police station for questioning. The evidence found at the scene and in his car was enough for the police to charge him immediately. At the police station, Rajiv appeared calm when confronted by the investigators. He did not cooperate but did not deny the charges. Rajiv's demeanor made the investigators realize that they were dealing with a murderer who was not only ruthless but also cold-blooded. But after a heated interrogation, Rajiv denied everything and now he had to face the law. In the following days, information about the case spread quickly. The brutality and gruesome details of the incident horrified the community. The media reported it, calling it one of the most horrifying crimes of the decade. Those who knew Rajiv were shocked that a son could be so cruel to his own parents. Rajiv Desai's trial began in early 2011 and lasted for 2 months. The trial was closely watched, with the courtroom packed with reporters and onlookers. The gruesome details that came to light not only sparked outrage, but also left many horrified by the defendant's cold-bloodedness. Prosecutors presented irrefutable evidence to prove that Rajiv was the sole mastermind and had carried out the murders with intent. The notebook in which he had planned the murders, found in Rajiv's room, became the focus of the case. The contents inside not only described in detail every step he planned to take, but also showed careful calculation from how to approach the victim to how to handle the body to avoid detection. In addition, blood samples on Rajiv's clothes and car matched the DNA of Mahesh and Neha Desai, creating a complete and undeniable evidentiary picture. Testimony from family members and friends who witnessed the strained relationship between Rajiv and his parents reinforced the prosecutor's argument that his motives were greed and selfishness. The jury was quick to reach a verdict. Rajiv was convicted of first-degree murder and abuse of a corpse. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, a sentence that was considered appropriate for the crime he had committed. The trial ended, leaving those who knew the Desai family relieved but haunted. The image of Rajiv being led from the courtroom, handcuffed and expressionless, was a tragic end to a once loving family destroyed by his own son. Story Point 5. In 2014, in Isla Vista, a peaceful coastal town in California, USA, a series of bloody events shocked the community. Amidst the bustling atmosphere of the residential area near the University of California, Santa Barbara, a tragedy suddenly occurred, breaking the inherent tranquility. The gunshots rang out, leaving an indelible mark on local history. The whole country was caught up in questions surrounding a dark plan that had been simmering for a long time, while the answer still lay deep in the dark corners of a lost soul. Elliot Rodger was born in 1991 in London, England, into a wealthy family with international roots. His father, Peter Rodger, was a director who had participated in major film projects, while his mother, Chin Rodger, was a former Malaysian actress with outstanding beauty. When Elliot was young, the family decided to move to the United States to seek better development opportunities. They settled in California, known for its dynamic, modern lifestyle, and the center of the entertainment industry that his father was pursuing. Elliot grew up in a seemingly ideal environment. He received a high-quality education at prestigious schools, had the opportunity to be exposed to many extracurricular activities, and enjoyed a life of material comfort. However, behind the seemingly perfect exterior, Elliot soon showed signs that he had difficulty integrating into society. From an early age, he was diagnosed with mild autism, which severely affected his ability to communicate and develop personal relationships. While his peers easily made friends and participated in social activities, Elliot often withdrew into his own world. He found it difficult to understand the emotions and behaviors of others, which made him feel isolated. Elliot's friends' birthday parties or class reunions often ended in silence and awkwardness on his part. This loneliness and helplessness soon became an integral part of his life, coupled with feelings of abandonment and rejection. As he entered his teenage years, Elliot's social problems did not lessen but became more serious. In high school, he was teased by his classmates and was often left out of groups of friends. Elliot felt not only different but also inferior to others. Despite living in a wealthy, well-provided family, he always felt that he was lacking something more important: social recognition and affection from others. These feelings existed not only in his thoughts but were also carefully recorded by Elliot in his diaries. In these notes, he revealed a growing resentment towards society. Elliot was particularly resentful of people he perceived as having more perfect lives than he did, especially men who were successful in love and career, as well as women who he felt had ignored him. He described them as selfish and felt that the world was unfair in giving them everything that he had not. Elliot often wondered why he was being rejected by society. He could not understand why he was unable to make friends or attract attention from women. Over time, these questions became less self-reflection and more anger and bitterness. He began to develop a negative mindset, believing that society was responsible for his failures. Although his family tried to be supportive, Elliot often rejected their help. His parents took him to see a therapist several times, but Elliot rarely cooperated. He felt that these efforts could not change the fact that he was an outsider in every aspect of his life. Instead of seeking to improve himself, Elliot retreats into a fantasy world where he is the center and everyone else deserves to be punished for not accepting him. In his troubled inner world, Elliot is constantly haunted by loneliness. He believes himself to be a victim of a cruel and unjust society. These thoughts gradually pushed him into a state of psychological instability, where all hope was replaced by hatred and despair. As he grew older, Elliot's isolation deepened. Years that should have been a time for him to build relationships and find joy in life became a long series of failures and self-blame. He isolated himself from society, spending most of his time alone in his room, where he wrote bitter diary entries. Elliot Rogers spent years wallowing in hatred and despair, hatching a plan he called the Day of Revenge, a time when he would get even from the society that he believed had deprived him of any chance of a happy life. In his warped mind, Elliot saw this act not only as a personal liberation but also as a declaration of war on the social values that he felt had been marginalized. A key part of Elliot's plan is to write a 141-page manifesto titled My Twisted World. In the document, he details his life from childhood to the present, describing his frustrations, his bitterness, and his desire for revenge. Elliot not only describes his failures to make friends or attract women, but also turns those experiences into reasons to blame the world. He writes that women rejected him, made him feel worthless, and that men who were more successful than he was in love were his natural enemies in manifesto. Elliot's hatred is directed not only at strangers but also at his family. He blames his father, Peter Roger, for not being powerful enough to give him the perfect life he craves. He criticizes his mother, Chin Roger, for not marrying a richer man. For him, even the people who raised and cared for him become targets of hatred because they cannot fulfill his every reasonable desire. Elliot did not stop at writing the manifesto. For months, Elliot spent time researching and preparing the tools to carry out his plan. He began purchasing weapons legally, taking advantage of loopholes in California's background check system. He owned 3 semi-automatic handguns, purchased from 3 different stores to avoid detection. Elliot also amassed a large amount of ammunition, along with knives and other tools. His preparations did not stop at purchasing weapons. Elliot carefully researched the locations he planned to attack, especially sororities at the University of California, Santa Barbara. He believed that these were where the people he hated most gathered: women he felt had rejected him and men he considered luckier in manifesto. Elliot wrote that attacking the sorority would be a symbolic act of punishment for those he felt were the main cause of his misfortune. In addition, Elliot meticulously planned how to organize the Day of Revenge. He divided the specific time and location for each stage, from killing the people in the apartment where he lived to moving to the sorority to carry out the biggest attack. He also planned to have a chase with the police, creating a grand finale that he believed would be remembered by the world. During this time, Elliot's behavior became increasingly suspicious. He isolated himself completely, limiting communication with anyone, including his family. He spent most of his time in his room, writing manifesto, filming videos to spread on social media, and practicing how to use weapons. The videos Elliot posted during this time were full of harsh words, expressing resentment and seeing himself as a victim of society. Elliot also began to make a list of specific targets he planned to kill, including former classmates, neighbors, and even family members if they were around during the day of revenge. Notably, in the manifesto, Elliot emphasized that he wanted to kill not only for revenge but also to send a strong message that society was a cruel place and that he would punish it. Elliot's plan went beyond just carrying out the attack, but also included ensuring that his name would be remembered. He came up with the idea of sending his manifesto to the media and acquaintances shortly before the attack, to ensure that the world understood the message he wanted to convey. In the final days before Revenge Day, Elliot barely left his apartment. He prepared every little detail, from checking his weapons to drafting the manifesto emails he planned to send. His actions for Elliot were not only preparations for an attack, but also the final step to assert his existence to a world that he believed had forgotten him. On the afternoon of May 23, 2014, the atmosphere in Isla Vista was still calm, as if no one had anticipated the tragedy that was about to happen. In the small apartment where Elliot Roger lived with 3 roommates, everything was still normal, at least for them. But for Elliot, everything had been carefully prepared since morning. Standing in front of the mirror in his room, he stared at himself, his cold eyes clearly reflecting the determination he had long cherished. Beside him, a small bag containing the sharp knife he had bought weeks ago, along with other tools, lay neatly waiting to be used. As the clock struck 3 in the afternoon, Elliot decided it was time to act. He picked a time when all 3 of his roommates were present, making sure none of them could escape. In his mind, this was more than just a murder. This was the beginning of what he called Revenge Day, a meticulously planned, bloody plan to undo all the resentment he had accumulated over the years. Elliot stepped out of his room, the knife hidden in his sleeve. The small apartment felt strangely stuffy. One roommate was sitting on the sofa, headphones on, completely unaware of Elliot's presence. The second was busy with a meal in the kitchen, and the third had just entered through the front door. The space seemed to shrink as Elliot approached his first target. He moved silently, careful not to make any noise that might alert him. The attack began quickly and unexpectedly. The first roommate didn't even have time to remove his headphones before he felt the sharp pain of the first stab. He struggled, but Elliot put all his strength into each stab, causing the victim to quickly collapse. The noise of the struggle made the other 2 turn around, and panic spread throughout the apartment. The second roommate ran for the door, but the small space of the apartment did not allow him to escape. Elliot quickly chased after him, the knife in his hand swinging with power and determination. A scream rang out, but was interrupted by repeated stabs. The victim tried to resist, creating a fierce struggle, causing kitchen utensils to fall and shatter, creating a chaotic scene. The third person, witnessing everything, tried to hide in the bedroom, hoping the locked door could stop the killer. But Elliot did not give him the chance. With great force and iron determination, Elliot broke open the door and attacked the last victim. Despite the pleas, Elliot's anger overshadowed all other emotions. The attack only stopped when the last roommate lay motionless on the floor. After it was over, the apartment fell into an eerie silence. The walls and floors were all stained with blood, creating a gruesome scene that investigators later described as a true nightmare. The kitchen was a mess, with overturned chairs and broken glass strewn across the floor, all signs of the victim's desperate struggle. In the bedroom, the closet doors were open, a sign of a desperate escape attempt. Elliot left the apartment shortly afterward. Elliot Rogers sat behind the wheel of a black BMW, his eyes coldly fixed on the windshield as he drove toward the Alpha Phi sorority at the University of California, Santa Barbara. It was more than just a location in his brutal plan to Elliot. It was a symbol of everything he felt had been taken from him. In Manifesto, he had written viciously about the sorority, calling it a base for the girls he believed were the main cause of his loneliness and despair. The car stopped on the driveway in front of the brightly lit building. The peaceful air of the Isla Vista afternoon gave no hint of the tragedy that was about to unfold. Elliot sat still for a few minutes, breathing slowly and deeply, as if to keep his mind focused. He looked at the large building, with its sturdy entrance, and imagined the chaos he had planned, but reality soon shattered his expectations. The main door, though seemingly normal, was firmly locked. Elliot tried pushing, then banging, but no one inside opened the door. The caution of the guild members prevented him from making a break-in move. A sense of helplessness rose within Elliot, but it wasn't enough to make him give up. "If we can't get in, we'll make them come out," he muttered, pulling the semi-automatic pistol from the passenger seat. Standing in front of the door, he raised the gun and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The first gunshot tore through the quiet air, echoing throughout the area, startling everyone nearby. Two schoolgirls walking on the sidewalk in front of the building were the first to be targeted. Elliot took aim, his hands holding the gun with a chilling calm. A shot hit the first girl in the chest, knocking her to the ground. The second girl barely had time to turn her head before another bullet tore through her body, sending her crashing to the ground beside her friend. Blood splattered on the sidewalk, creating crimson streaks that contrasted with the afternoon light. A third student, standing a few meters away, was shot in the shoulder. She screamed in pain, trying to pull herself away, but leaving a trail of blood behind her. Elliot continued to shoot, ignoring the screams that echoed around him. The deafening sound of gunfire spread, shattering the peace of the area. Nearby students ran in panic, footsteps and cries for help mixed together in the chaos. From nearby apartments, a few students poked their heads out to look, then immediately pulled back, slamming the doors in horror. Others used their phones to call the police, their voices shaking as they tried to describe what was happening. Elliot, oblivious to the chaos, kept his gun tightly in his hand, as if each shot was a way for him to vent his anger on the world he hated. Within minutes of the first gunshot, the area was filled with fear. Students in the area rushed to take cover. A small group hid under tables in a nearby coffee shop, shivering and praying. Others ran into a nearby dormitory building, locking the doors and turning off the lights. The police received a series of emergency calls, but they were still on their way, leaving those at the scene to face the continuing nightmare. Not stopping there, Elliot got back into his car and drove around Isla Vista, determined to continue carrying out his plan of social destruction. His hands gripped the wheel, his eyes darting outside, looking for anyone who happened to be on the road. In Elliot's mind, these streets, these ordinary people, were the embodiment of the injustice he believed he had suffered. And now he was going to make them pay. Elliot stepped on the gas, and the BMW sped down the familiar streets. Through the car window, he saw a group of students walking on the sidewalk, chatting happily. Without hesitation, Elliot rolled down the window, pulled out a semi-automatic pistol, and pulled the trigger. The sharp sound of gunfire tore through the evening air, startling the group. A young man was shot in the leg, falling down immediately. The rest screamed in panic, running around looking for cover. The BMW did not stop. Elliot accelerated, continuing to aim at other pedestrians. At an intersection, a couple was stopped at a traffic light. Elliot drove closer, firing 2 shots. The first bullet went through the window of a nearby coffee shop, while the second bullet hit a woman's shoulder. Blood began to flow, staining her shirt red as her boyfriend frantically pulled her to the side of the road. Elliot did not only target large groups of people. As he drove through a quieter neighborhood, the streetlights illuminated an older man walking with his dog. Elliot didn't think twice. He raised his gun and aimed. The bullet missed its target, but the sound was enough to make the man fall to his knees, and the dog barked in panic. A few minutes later, Elliot saw a small group of students standing in front of a convenience store. Without aiming carefully, he fired 3 shots in a row. One male student was grazed by a bullet in the cheek. The other was seriously wounded in the abdomen. The rest screamed, trying to pull their friends into the store for shelter. Bullets weren't Elliot's only weapon. As he drove through an intersection near the park, he saw a cyclist crossing the street. Intending to cause the most chaos, Elliot didn't slow down. He stepped on the gas and drove straight towards the person. The impact was so strong that the bicycle was crushed, and the cyclist was thrown into the air, flying more than 10 meters before falling to the ground. The victim's body lay motionless, but Elliot didn't stop to look. He continued to drive over the victim's body as if it were just a small obstacle in the road. Gunshots and screams rang out everywhere. The normally bustling streets were now filled with chaos. Other students, realizing that there was a madman shooting and driving recklessly, began to seek shelter. Some ran into nearby dormitories and locked their doors, while others hid in cafes and shops. The local police received a series of emergency calls from all over. They quickly mobilized their forces, organizing a pursuit. But Elliot, with his mastery of the BMW and his fearless recklessness, made stopping him a huge challenge. He constantly changed directions, driving through small alleys, avoiding areas with police cars. Every street Elliot traveled became the scene of brutal violence. On another street, he opened fire on a group of friends taking pictures on the beach. One person was shot in the stomach and fell to the ground. The rest ran away, leaving their belongings and cameras on the sand. At a street corner, a woman was holding her young son by the hand. Elliot, seeing them from afar, accelerated and fired 2 shots in quick succession. The first bullet missed, but the second grazed the woman's arm, causing her to fall, clutching her child in fear. Meanwhile, the police force had approached the area where Elliot was driving. 3 patrol cars immediately followed closely behind, sirens and lights on. But Elliot had no intention of stopping. He accelerated, weaving through crowded streets, continuing to fire at the police cars. A bullet pierced the windshield of a patrol car, narrowly missing an officer inside. Elliot drove toward a small square where many people had gathered. He pulled the trigger repeatedly, not caring about the specific target. The sound of shattering glass, screams, and ambulance sirens mixed together, creating a scene of unprecedented chaos in Isla Vista. The urgent pursuit finally ended when the police forced Elliot Roger to stop at an intersection near the center of Isla Vista. Patrol cars blocked both ends of the road, red and blue police lights flashing, illuminating the entire area. The sirens gradually died down, replaced by a tense silence as officers, guns drawn, surrounded the black BMW. Inside the car, Elliot sat motionless, his eyes staring blankly through the windshield, but his hands still tightly gripped the pistol. Realizing there was no escape, Elliot bowed his head for a moment, as if thinking about something. But just as the police approached, ordering him out of the car, Elliot quickly raised the gun, pointed it at himself, and pulled the trigger. The crisp sound rang out, ending the life of the man who had spread terror. When the police broke down the car door to investigate, they found Elliot's body slumped in the driver's seat, the gun still in his hand. Blood from his self-inflicted wound had stained his shirt and the seats, creating a grim scene that the officers would never forget. Shell casings were scattered across the floor of the car, a reminder of the accidental shooting that had taken the lives of many innocent people. Dried bloodstains covered the seats and steering wheel, evidence of the injuries he had inflicted throughout the night. The scene at the intersection where Elliot had stopped quickly became the focus of the investigation. Ambulances were parked nearby, but none of them were used on Elliot. He had died at the scene. Police cordoned off the area, bright yellow lights illuminating the chaotic scene, the crumpled car, Elliot's body, and the traces he had left behind from his bloody journey. Meanwhile, investigators in the previous areas were still gathering evidence, trying to piece together Elliot's actions that day. Every street he walked, every bullet he fired was part of the larger crime scene. But now, the source of it all, Elliot had taken his own life, leaving behind a host of unanswered questions. Story 6. Late one night, South Korean football star Son Heung-min sat frozen, staring at his phone screen. Before him was a blurry ultrasound image, accompanied by a chilling message, a threat from someone claiming to be his ex-girlfriend, declaring she was carrying his child. In exchange for her silence, she demanded an exorbitant sum of money for the national team captain, whose public image had always been free of scandal. This was nothing short of a waking nightmare. That ultrasound image sparked a sensational extortion case, one that began with a secret romance, unfolded through shadowy threats, and culminated in a criminal duo facing handcuffs under the world's scrutiny. Son Heung-min, 32 years old, has long been hailed as South Korea's national treasure in football. He is the proud captain of the national team and a shining star in the English Premier League with Tottenham Hotspur. Since joining Tottenham in 2015, Son has scored 173 goals in 451 matches for the North London club, cementing his place as one of the greatest strikers in the team's history. His talent, professionalism, and disciplined lifestyle have earned him admiration and respect from fans worldwide. Son once shared that his father, a strict former footballer, advised him to delay marriage until retirement to focus entirely on his career. As a result, Son's personal life has remained private, almost entirely free of romantic scandals. This made the news of his involvement in an extortion case tied to a love affair all the more shocking. It all began with a clandestine relationship. Son Heung-min reportedly dated a young woman whom we'll call A in mid-2024. And then 29 was a freelance model who met Son through mutual friends. Their relationship was brief and entirely under wraps, true to Son's habit of guarding his private life. Neither the media nor his fans knew of her existence until the case exploded into public view. In June 2024, Son received an unexpected message from A, his former girlfriend, whom he hadn't seen in months. Her tone was a mix of panic and resolve. She claimed to be pregnant with his child, attaching an ultrasound image as proof. The message wasn't just an announcement. It came with a demand for a large sum of money in exchange for her silence about the pregnancy. Her words, though polite, carried an unmistakable threat. If Son didn't comply, the story of his out-of-wedlock child would be leaked to the press. Son was stunned. His mind must have raced with questions. Was the child truly his? If the story broke, what would happen to the reputation he had worked so hard to build? Though skeptical, Son knew a personal scandal could devastate his carefully crafted image. After a moment of confusion, he chose to act cautiously. He contacted his manager and private lawyer. Within days, a discreet meeting was arranged between Son, A, and his representatives to negotiate. At the meeting, A insisted on her pregnancy claim, even presenting medical records from a hospital confirming she was 5 to 6 weeks pregnant. Son, however, had doubts. The timeline of their encounters didn't align with the pregnancy's age, and the ultrasound image A provided was cropped, missing critical details like the hospital's name or the patient's identity. His instincts told him something was amiss, but he opted for a peaceful resolution. Son understood that even if he denied the claims, a leaked story about impregnating a girlfriend could irreparably damage his reputation. So he agreed to A's demands immediately. A confidential agreement was swiftly drafted. Son would pay A $220,000, approximately 300 million won, and in return, A would sign a non-disclosure agreement, NDA, to remain silent about the pregnancy. On June 24, 2024, just days after the initial threatening message, A informed Son she had decided to terminate the pregnancy. The next day, June 25th, she underwent an abortion at a hospital, arranged discreetly by both parties. Once the money was transferred to A's account, the agreement was finalized. Son breathed a sigh of relief, believing the nightmare was over. He had paid, and A had gotten what she wanted. After the deal, Son cut off all contact with A, returning to his routine and focusing on his career. No one outside the inner circle knew of this secret. What Son didn't anticipate was that fateful ultrasound image was merely the beginning of a chain of tragedies. The shadow of extortion had briefly retreated, but a year later, it would return to haunt him with even greater intensity. The victim in this case is Son Heung-min, a global superstar but also a young man confronting a personal mistake. Born in 1992, Sun grew up in a family where his father, a former footballer, instilled in him a strong sense of discipline. He moved to Germany as a teenager to train, quickly proving his talent in the Bundesliga before transferring to England. At 32, Sun has reached the pinnacle of his career, captain of South Korea's national team, Tottenham's key striker, and co-Golden Boot winner of the Premier League in 2022. Yet, this seemingly perfect figure stumbled into an unforeseen trap in his private life, a moment of vulnerability that was ruthlessly exploited. In this story, Sun emerges both as a victim, suffering financially and emotionally, and as a courageous individual who stood up to expose wrongdoing to protect his integrity. In contrast to Sun are the two main suspects behind the extortion, A, his secret lover, and a man referred to as B, who later orchestrated the first. A, the woman who sent the ultrasound image to extort Sun, is a complex figure. At 29, she was described as an attractive freelance model. She met Sun through a mutual acquaintance during one of his visits to South Korea, possibly during a national team match or a break between seasons. Their brief romance unfolded quietly. Notably, during the same period, A was also involved with another man, a successful businessman later referred to as Man Number 1 with Sun as Man Number 2 quotation marks. In other words, A was dating both men simultaneously. When she discovered her pregnancy, she was unsure who the father was. Instead of confronting the truth, A chose to play both sides, informing both men that they were the father. In a leaked recording of a secret conversation later revealed, B confronted A. "Do you even know whose child it is?" Admitted, "How could I possibly know?" When B pressed further, asking why she told the same story to both men, A fell silent because she had indeed claimed to both that they were the father. In the end, the businessman, Man Number 1, ignored A's demands while Sun, Man Number 2, believed her and agreed to pay. This difference in response made Sun the target for A's exploitation. A's motives seem primarily financial. After receiving the $220,000, Bui Angon, Thai $220,000 from Sun, A spent lavishly. According to investigations, she paid $58,000 to a female shaman named C, who had predicted her pregnancy and performed spiritual rituals to cleanse her. After the abortion, A and C went on a luxury shopping spree, spending tens of thousands of dollars on designer goods. A also put down a $36,000 deposit on a new apartment and furnished it with expensive items. Within less than a year, most of the $220,000 was gone. It became clear that A had no intention of keeping the child, and the money wasn't used for long-term stability. This led many to view her as a gold digger who preyed on Sun's trust. However, a darker angle emerged. A was heavily influenced by the shaman, C, whom she trusted implicitly. C had foretold A's pregnancy and stayed by her side throughout the ordeal, from notifying Sun to the abortion. A even paid C a substantial gratitude fee. This raised questions about C's role. Was she a calculating manipulator, or was A simply seeking spiritual solace? Later, C denied any involvement in the extortion, claiming A had tried to move on quietly and blaming B for the subsequent events. Regardless, A's relationship with C suggests she wasn't entirely alone. She had advisors and blind faith that contributed to her initial decision to extort Sun. The other key figure, B, is the true villain of this saga. In his mid-40s, B is described as a man with a criminal record for extortion and a body covered in tattoos. By late 2024, after A had squandered nearly all of Sun's $220,000 payment, she met B through an introduction by the shaman C. A romantic relationship quickly developed between A and B, and within 1 or 2 months, they were engaged by January 2025. On the surface, B played the role of a devoted fiancé, but in reality, he became fixated on A's secret. While going through her phone, B stumbled upon the non-disclosure agreement, NDA, regarding the abortion and Sun's payment. He immediately saw it as an untapped goldmine. The NDA included a steep penalty clause. If A revealed the affair, she would owe 10 times the original amount, approximately $2.2 million USD, $3.1 billion. B deemed this clause unfairly harsh on his fiancée, but more importantly, he saw it as a lucrative opportunity to exploit. From late 2024 into early 2025, B devised a second, more intricate extortion scheme. This time, his targets weren't just Sun Hyung-min, but also A and the shaman, C, anyone tied to the NDA. B's plan unfolded in calculated, duplicitous steps, revealing his cunning and treacherous nature. Step 1. Demanding payment to void the NDA. B approached Sun's representatives, posing as A's fiancé. He complained that the NDA's tenfold penalty was too severe, claiming it prevented him from marrying A without fear of legal repercussions. B demanded $14,600, $20 million as compensation in exchange for handing over all related documents, including the NDA and evidence. Essentially, B offered to buy peace for Sun before his wedding to A. However, Sun and his team ignored the demand. They knew that as long as A upheld the NDA's silence, it posed no threat. Step 2. Threatening media exposure. When Sun's side didn't budge, B escalated to public threats. He contacted Dispatch, a notorious South Korean tabloid known for breaking celebrity scandals, and leaked details about the NDA and Sun's extortion ordeal. B hoped the threat of media exposure would pressure Sun into complying. Surprisingly, Dispatch didn't immediately publish the story, possibly conducting their own investigation, as the scandal didn't hit headlines at the time. Step 3. Betraying Stoltz. Frustrated by the lack of results, B executed a shocking betrayal. He contacted Sun's team again, this time aligning himself with Sun to expose A. B provided evidence, recordings, messages between himself and A, claiming that A and the shaman, C, had deceived Sun. He urged Sun to sue A for fraud, offering his assistance for a price, $51,000, 70 million won, for providing the evidence. B's greed now extended beyond Sun to A and C. He was willing to sell out his own fiancée for profit. In one message, B boasted that he had spent $58,000, 80 million won, to silence A and C, suggesting that Sun's payment of $51,000 would be a mutually beneficial deal. It was a masterful double cross. At this point, as Sun's team later described, the Pandora's box of the case was flung wide open. The evidence and recordings from B left Sun and his associates reeling. They learned that A had been involved with another man, casting doubt on the paternity of the child, and that her pregnancy claim was likely a calculated ploy for money. The speed with which she terminated the pregnancy after receiving payment further confirmed her true motive: profit, not motherhood. Sun's initial trust in A had cost him dearly, nearly destroying his reputation. But B's greed inadvertently exposed the truth. Around the same time, the relationship between A and B began to fracture. A had believed she could rely on B, unaware that he would betray her when his plans faltered. According to Dispatch, tensions erupted among A, B, and C. In leaked recordings, A pleaded with B to renegotiate the NDA, likely to soften its penalties, while B promised to buy her a house if they could extort billions of won from Sun. Meanwhile, C distanced herself from A, suspecting B's manipulation. In a later statement to the press, C claimed B deceived A for months. She tried to stop him, but he kept pushing to extort Sun. By early 2025, mistrust and infighting plagued the trio of A, B, and C, each pursuing their own agendas. The second extortion scheme was unraveling from within. With the Pandora's box open, Sun Hyung-min realized it was time to fight back. Continued concessions would only embolden his tormentors. Rather than fear the scandal, Sun chose to confront it head-on. Alongside his lawyers and representatives, he gathered the evidence provided by B, threatening messages, the NDA copy, the original ultrasound image, and recorded conversations. On May 7, 2025, Sun filed a formal complaint with the Gangnam police station in Seoul, detailing how he had been extorted. It was a daunting decision, as it meant his private life would no longer remain hidden. Yet, Sun and his team believed his honor could only be restored through the truth. They were ready to face public scrutiny rather than keep paying off criminals. Upon receiving a complaint from a global celebrity like Sun Hyung-min, South Korean police sprang into action. The Gangnam police station's investigative team swiftly initiated procedures, summoning Sun and witnesses, including his personal assistant, who reportedly received direct threats from B, collecting physical evidence, Sun's phone containing the threatening messages, a copy of the ultrasound image, and the NDA provided by Sun. Authorities also discreetly monitored A and B, the primary suspects, to ensure they didn't flee. By the evening of May 14, 2025, with sufficient evidence secured, police executed simultaneous arrests of A and B, the two main suspects. Both were apprehended in Seoul. The media didn't disclose specific details of the arrests, only noting that both were handcuffed and taken to the police station that night. The following day, May 15th, prosecutors requested a detention order to hold the suspects during the investigation, citing concerns they might destroy evidence or abscond. On May 17th, the Seoul Central District Court held a hearing to review the detention request. After examining the evidence and acknowledging the case's severity, the court approved the detention of both A and B. Thus, the extortion duo officially fell into the hands of the law, facing criminal proceedings. On May 17, 2025, A and B were escorted to the Seoul Central District Court for the detention hearing. Not a full trial, but a session to determine whether they would remain in custody during the investigation. Outside the courthouse, a swarm of reporters and camera lenses awaited. Given Sun Hyung-min's status as South Korea's top football star, media attention was immense. As she stepped out of the police van, she wore a hoodie and a face mask, attempting to shield her face with a stack of documents. However, a female officer abruptly pushed the documents aside, exposing A's face, still partially masked but with distinct features visible, to the sea of cameras. The image spread like wildfire, sparking heated discussions. A handcuffed and slightly hunched, remained silent amid a barrage of reporters' questions. Do you admit to the extortion? Do you have any message for Sun Hyung-min? Meanwhile, B, the male suspect, arrived at the court simultaneously, but he was more cautious, wearing a baseball cap pulled low and a face mask, concealing his features more effectively. This contrast fueled public criticism of the authorities. Many argued that the police failed to protect A's basic privacy as an unconvicted suspect, especially since her offense wasn't a violent crime. Some expressed outrage. She's not a brutal murderer to be treated like this. Others noted that even notorious criminals had been allowed to cover their faces, while A was publicly shamed. Regardless, the incident underscored the case's media frenzy, where every detail at the courthouse became fodder for public debate. During the detention hearing, the court reviewed the prosecution's case against A and B. The evidence was compelling. Text messages from A to Sun, including the ultrasound image and her demand for money, the signed NDA, bank records of the $220,000, 300 million won transfer, and Sun's own testimony. Police also presented medical findings. Hospital records confirmed A's pregnancy and subsequent abortion, but paternity couldn't be established, bolstering the claim that A fabricated the story of Sun fathering her child to extort money. For B, his messages and recordings with both Sun's team and A exposed an organized extortion plot. Dispatch further provided police with materials B had shared, including a recording where A admitted she didn't know the child's father and had contacted both men. This evidence clearly showed A and B's collusion in threatening and extorting Sun with false information about a pregnancy. Faced with this mountain of evidence, A and B remained silent, offering no public statements to the media or the court. Given the case's severity and the risk of evidence tampering or flight, the judge approved their detention pending the completion of the investigation. The case now entered the criminal prosecution phase. A faced charges of extortion and fraud, while B was investigated for complicity and intentional extortion. Both would remain in a Seoul detention facility until their trial, expected in the coming months. As the investigation continued post-hearing, police noted they were examining key details. Notably, the authenticity of the ultrasound image A used to extort Sun was under scrutiny. If the image was not hers or had been altered, it would provide clear evidence of fraud. Additionally, individuals like the shaman C might be questioned to determine any involvement in the extortion scheme. As of late May 2025, no charges had been filed against C, suggesting authorities likely identified A and B as the primary accomplices. The Sun Hyung-min extortion case became a media firestorm, dominating headlines and social media not only in South Korea, but worldwide. In South Korea, Sun's name had always been synonymous with positive traits: a dedicated athlete, a humble young man, and a scandal-free figure. Thus, news of him being targeted with a fake pregnancy scheme shocked and outraged the public. Many fans sent messages of support, praising Sun's courage in reporting the crime to expose the truth. On Korean social media, comments reflected sympathy. He's just a victim in this. Poor Sun, targeted because of his fame and wealth. Some criticized Sun for being careless in his romantic life, but this view was overshadowed by widespread condemnation of A and B. Clearly, in the public's eyes, Sun was the wrong party, and the extortionists deserve punishment. South Korean media followed the case meticulously. Major outlets like Chosun, Jungang Ilbo, and Yonhap provided constant updates. Dispatch, initially contacted by B, published an exclusive investigation revealing behind-the-scenes details. The shaman, C's prediction of A's pregnancy, A's simultaneous relationships with two men, and her lavish spending of Sun's money. These revelations, widely cited by other outlets, made the case feel like a cinematic drama. International media also took notice. Reuters and AP reported Sun's complaint about being extorted over a false pregnancy claim, while sports outlets like ESPN and The Guardian emphasized Sun's victimhood in a scheme fueled by fabricated rumors. Sun's global fame amplified the scandal, thrusting his off-field ordeal into the spotlight. In Vietnam, Sun's story sparked significant buzz. Vietnamese football fans, who admired Sun for his goals and humility, discussed the case with a mix of shock, regret, and relief that justice was served. Some outlets affectionately called Sun South Korea's national treasure and expressed outrage on his behalf over the fake pregnancy scheme. On forums, fans remarked that celebrities must beware of illicit relationships and not let fleeting desires ruin a career. Ironically, the scandal coincided with a pivotal moment in Sun's career, the Europa League final between Tottenham and Manchester United. Despite the personal turmoil, Sun played and led Tottenham to victory, showcasing remarkable professionalism. Many reports suggested that resolving his personal crisis allowed Sun to shed emotional weight and focus on the crucial match. A positive outcome of the ordeal was that Sun Hyung-min's image not only remained intact, but garnered more sympathy. Unlike scandals caused by moral failings, e.g. gambling or violence, Sun was undeniably a victim here. His decision to seek justice rather than conceal the issue earned widespread praise. Sun's management company issued a statement. Sun Hyung-min is clearly the victim in this matter. We will cooperate fully with the authorities and pursue legal action to the fullest. This resolute stance resonated with the public, who saw Sun's actions as not only reclaiming his own justice, but also deterring future exploitation of celebrities. However, the case also sparked debates about privacy and gender bias. Some argued that, despite her crime, a deserved basic personal rights. Older, until a final verdict was reached, the exposure of her face on television was seen as harsh, especially compared to B's more protected treatment. This disparity raised questions about fairness, with critics noting that male criminals often received more leniency in shielding their identities. Others countered that A's actions were particularly egregious, exploiting the sacred role of motherhood as a tool for extortion, making her offense morally reprehensible. These voices called for harsh penalties to set a precedent. The Sun Hyung-min extortion case is a riveting tale, blending the glamour of football stardom with the dark underbelly of personal betrayal. From a seemingly innocuous ultrasound image, a sophisticated criminal scheme targeted one of Asia's biggest sports icons. Sun endured dark days, betrayed and threatened by someone he once trusted. Yet he made the right choice, embracing the light of truth. By courageously exposing the crime, Sun not only safeguarded his honor, but sent a powerful message. No star, no matter how celebrated, is immune to crime without standing up and seeking justice. Now, with the extortionists behind bars awaiting judgment, Sun Heung-min can return to the pitch, where he belongs. Fans believe this ordeal will serve as a lesson for Sun to be more cautious in his personal relationships. A footballer's career is fleeting, as Sun himself has noted, and he's determined not to let off-field chaos derail him. To the public, Sun remains the dedicated and resilient captain who triumphed in both the 90-minute battles on the field and the grueling fight against temptation and crime often. His story, told as a breathless true crime saga, ultimately delivers a satisfying resolution where truth and justice prevail and the guilty face the consequences. As the rain falls and the night deepens, thank you for being here with me at Radio Night Crime. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the need to stay aware, even in the stillness of the night. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the sound of the rain lull you to sleep, and until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night keep you company.